I'm Old Sneelock. Welcome to another episode of Old Sneelock's Workshop. I'm glad to be here. Hi, I'm Old Sneelock. Welcome to another episode of Old Sneelock's Workshop. Well, we've been talking about water quite a bit, and it's nice that I'm able to do this because I can't do much lifting and tugging against doctor's orders, and not a good idea. So anyways, taking the opportunity to tell you some stories from the days when I was actually working for a living. I used to work at a company called Borg in Coldwater, Michigan, and Borg was a really great company to work for. Loved it. But like every company, there's always something a little goofy, something odd that happens, and you wonder, is it me or is it just that this is a goofy thing to do? Well, in this particular case, it wasn't me. But it was the situation I was in. We had a job to do. Borg made radiators, and as part of the process, they used a thing called a baking oven. And the idea of the baking oven was you took all the assembly components to make a core for a radiator, which was the tubes and the fins, and you assembled them. The tubes had been run through a tube mill where they were coated with solder. The fins were solid copper, thin fins, just like radiators used to be. Well, you would take the fins, slide the tubes into them, and then you would take them over and set them on the floor. The operator for the dip pot would go over and pick up the core assembly and jostle it on the floor so that all the tubes were the same length. And then a couple of women would come over and put the headers on. They set the header over the tubes, or rolled the headers, and expanded the end of the tube, which locked it into the header. Then the operator for the oven would pick up the core and set it into a frame for the bake oven. And the frame was just a big square piece of iron with slots in the end so that the header dropped down into it and it held the headers even, straight, and square. The operator would then take a comb and make sure that the fins were all straight, no dents, dings, or ripples. Then they would cycle the oven, and the oven rack would slide into the oven, where the oven was kept at a temperature between 600 and 800 degrees. The core would heat up because it was a convection oven. There was hot air blowing through the core, which would heat the core quite rapidly. And in a couple of minutes, it had heated it up enough so that the solder on the tubes sweated off onto the fins and soldered the fins onto the tubes. It also soldered the headers in place. Well, that bake oven needed to have a source of heat, and it used electrical elements. And it was a good design, nothing wrong with that. Gas-fired is a bit harder to control the temperature and harder to control the rate, because when you turn on the gas fire, it has to stay on, and so the heat has a tendency to have higher fluctuations than an electric system. Enough of that. The operator looked up at the top of the oven and he noticed a drip of water landing on top of the controls for the oven. Well, the oven had a 400 amp service feeding it because it used 400 amps to run the elements. So he was concerned. Rightfully so. He went to his boss. They went to the plant manager. Plant manager went to my boss. My boss said, well, we got to go fix that. Well, we went over to the bake oven, and what had happened is one of the sprinkler heads had started dripping. Bad sign. When they start dripping, likely to pop open. When a sprinkler head pops open, it's designed to put out a lot of water and put out a fire. That's the whole point and purpose of the sprinkler head. Put out a lot of water in a real quick hurry and put out a fire. Well, if you don't have a fire, you really don't want to have a sprinkler head going off. You also don't want to have it going off over your 400 amp service going to the bake oven. Couple of problems. The oven was running, so it was hot on top of the oven. And the only way to get to the pipe that was leaking was to climb up on top of the oven. Well, my boss sent one of the guys out to drain the sprinkler, and I got ready to go up on top of the oven and take out the leaking sprinkler head and put in a new one. Simple enough job. Pipe wrench, crank it out. You've already got the sprinkler head taped up, so you crank out the old one, crank in the new one, done. 2 minutes, maybe. Get down, put away your tools, all done. No problem. Yeah, right. So I get the 10-foot ladder and I climb up on top of the oven, and I drag up a 6-foot ladder with me and I set it on top of the oven so that I can reach the sprinkler head. It's about a 20-foot ceiling in the building, and I can climb up a 6-foot ladder and reach the sprinkler head just fine. The only problem is the service feeding the oven is a 400 amp bus bar. And since it's inside a building, it's not a rain-tight bus bar. It's not designed to have water dripping on it. It has 3 big copper bars running down the length of it, and those copper bars are held in ceramic insulators, and those ceramic insulators are to make it so that you don't conduct electricity between one of those copper bars and the other, because with that many amps you've got a welder, and as soon as you get an arc going in there, it turns into a plasma torch. It just burns everything up. It's a huge mess. Now, of course, there's fuses and breakers and links in there so that it shouldn't arc for a long period. But if it arcs for just a moment, it puts a carbon arc on that insulator. Next thing you know, it's going to arc all the time. You can reset the fuse anytime you want, but it's going to just arc out and trip. End result, you don't want to have water dripping into that bus bar. Don't want to create that carbon path, don't want to short things out, don't want to have to replace a 10-foot section of 400 amp bus bar. Expensive? Yeah. Downtime? Huge. Why did we do this during the week? Well, somebody was concerned that the sprinkler head could go off. Well, we could have waited till the end of the shift and done it. We didn't have a second shift. We didn't have a third shift. We didn't work on Saturday or Sunday. But it was determined that it needed to be done right that minute. Okay, I get paid. So I'm up on top of the ladder with my new sprinkler head with a tape on it, and I climb up there and the sprinkler head is dripping. Well, that should have been a red flag, but it wasn't. This is the first time I've changed out a sprinkler head. Something new for me. Didn't have sprinkler heads at the foundry. Don't want water spraying over hot iron. Bad idea. So, Borg Warner, sprinkler heads. I climb up, like I said, I'm up on top of the ladder, and the sprinkler lines are drained, right? Somebody went out to do it. My boss said they're all drained, everything's ready to go. Take him at his word. Not a good plan to tell your boss, no, I don't trust you. Okay, from now on, go check the lines yourself. Because I cranked open the line and took out the old sprinkler head. And just as I pulled the old one out, I heard gluck. And I knew I was screwed. I no sooner got the new sprinkler head in my hand, ready to jam it into the thing, and water started coming out of that line. Well, it wasn't really water. It was black mud. Sprinkler lines are made out of black iron pipe. And black iron pipe, especially on a sprinkler line where the water just sits, tends to corrode. And the corrosion, being heavier than water, settles to the bottom and forms a layer of thick mud. How do I know this? I had a training in it. It went gluck, and up out of that pipe shot a solid stream of black mud. Now I was about 3 foot below the ceiling, which is a steel deck plate covered with tar and felt and tar. Call it a flopping mop. And when that stream of mud hit that ceiling, it spread out in a perfect umbrella. Just whoosh. Well, I was standing under it, so guess where the mud went? Yeah, all over me. I was wearing safety glasses, and the minute it hit and I felt it starting to come down, I closed my eyes just instinctively. And it was coming down and coming down and coming down. And my partner is down on the floor. He's supposed to be there as a watchman to make sure that if I need something, he's there to help me or to go get something or anything like that. But he's far enough away the mud doesn't reach him. And there's nothing he can do. He yells at me, "Get down! Get down!" Well, I realized that I was standing next to a 400 amp bus bar that was being soaked with water, and I couldn't see. And I couldn't open my eyes because the mud was still coming down. So the only thing I could do was just stay there. And I said, "I'm not moving. I'm next to a live 400 amp bus bar. I don't want to touch something wrong, and I'm afraid if I start trying to climb down the ladder, I'm going to fall off because I'm on top of an oven that's 10 feet up. And the top of the oven, by now, I know this, and at the time, but it was instinct, don't climb down off the ladder into something that you don't know. You're okay, stay still, don't move." So that's what I did. Eventually, the water stopped coming out of the pipe. Well, mud. It never really did come out clean water. And the water went down and stopped. And I put the new sprinkler head in and climbed down off the stepladder. Climbed down off the top of the oven, bringing the 6-foot stepladder with me. And I was covered in mud. I was completely black. Everything. Shirt, clothes, everything. Glasses covered with mud. I had taken my hand and wiped the mud off my eyes, so I had 2 white patches. I knew this later when I finally got a chance to see. Climbed down off the oven and I said, "I'm going to go get cleaned up," because I knew I was covered with mud. Trying to drip down into my eyes. I didn't want to do it anymore. I wanted to get cleaned up. My boss was standing there and he said, "No, we got to go get the sprinkler turned back on. We've got to refill the lines and get the sprinklers turned back on. We can't leave the building without sprinklers." Okay. So we go in the compressor room, and the compressor room had a large 10-inch main that came up through the floor. That was just for the fire sprinklers. Had its own separate valving system. Came right from the main coming to the building. First thing off the line, and then it fed into the building and on up through the floor. Up about 4 foot was a check valve. And the check valve was there as part of the sprinkler system because the idea was you filled the pipes, and then so if a sprinkler head went off, water went. As soon as the line emptied and the pressure dropped in that pipe, that opened the check valve, and the check valve flooded the line with more water and kept the water line running, kept the sprinklers running. And contrary to popular belief, only the head that goes off keeps running. It doesn't flood the whole building. It doesn't spray everywhere. Heads are individual. You have to break the fusible link on the head before the head goes off. So anyways, we go in there and we open the line and start filling the mains, and they fill rather quickly because it's a lot of water coming through that 10-inch. What had happened that caused this whole problem of me getting covered with mud was my boss told somebody, and I won't mention the guy's name, told somebody to go drain the lines. And he drained the lines. But the building was made with a 30-foot high section and a 20-foot high section. He drained the 30-foot high section. So there was no water in the top. But the bottom was still full. The bottom is where the leaking line was. To go from the lower section, the bottom, to the upper section, the top, you had a 6-inch main that ran through the building and filled all the pipes and kept water going to everything. 6-inch main with 2-inch feeders, went out to 1 inch down to the smallest line on the sprinkler system was 1 inch. That had the sprinkler heads in it. Well, that 6-inch line was pretty good size. It was 10 feet tall and 6 inches in diameter. And there were 2 of them. One on the north end, one on the south end. So all that water, all that standing water pressure, they call that 10 foot of head. That's quite a bit of water pressure. Meant that all that water had to come out that one sprinkler before the water stopped coming. So it had to drain all those pipes. 6-inch pipe, each foot holds about a gallon of water, close. And with 2 pipes, I had 20 feet of water. So I had 20 gallons of water to come out of that. About the same time that it takes to drain a bathtub is about what it took to drain out the water lines. So I had a lot of water come out and it was a mess. When the water pressure in the sprinkler lines drops, the check valve opens, water from the 10-inch main fills the line and keeps water flowing through the sprinkler head until someone shuts off the main line, which is usually either by the building or out near the road. Jerry and I went into the compressor room and started working on the sprinkler check valve. We opened the line, filled the water lines in the building, and when the water lines fill, you open the main valve. All the water that's in that 10-inch pipe rushes into the system and fills the system fairly quickly. It's designed to have enough water coming into there to run every sprinkler head in the building full time. So that's a lot of water. At the same time, the water that's in the lines out under the street starts rushing towards the building because it's now got a cavity to fill. Water speeds up when it has an empty spot to go to. So that's all okay. We want that water to fill those lines quickly. We want to have the thing ready to go. We want to be able to flush the lines and turn everything back on and have the sprinkler heads going. There's a problem though. When they put the lines underneath the road, they didn't clean the lines of all the stuff that could get into the pipes. I don't know who the contractor was. Somebody the city of Coldwater bought to run water lines to their industrial park. But every time you open the lines, every time you open that check valve, rocks came through the water line along with the water. And that's bad enough. It goes up and it plugs the pipes and you got problems. But at the same time, the rocks come up and lock the check valve open. So the check valve is now open, and that means you have to open up the check valve, clean out the rocks, close the lines, repressurize them, do it over and over and over until you have the system filled with water and it builds pressure. So I'm still covered with mud. My boss won't let me go to the bathroom and see myself because he knows the minute I do, I'm going to go home. So we get the lines filled and everything's all taken care of. I go in the bathroom. I'm completely covered with mud. Like somebody took a paint roller and just covered me. So I'm not very happy. I've got mud in my hair. My hair is sticking out in spikes. But we get the lines shut off, we get the sprinkler head fixed, we get everything taken care of. By then it's time to go home. I get cleaned up and I go home. Talk about the paint line in the next video. It's going to be a good one. You'll want to tune in to see that one. Well, I'm not going to show you, but I'll tell you about it. If you have any suggestions for a new video, questions about today's video, or any of the other videos on the channel, just drop a note in the comments. You know I read them all. Thanks for watching.
This video is not to be viewed by anyone under the age of 13 in the U.S. or 16 in the European Union without the express written permission of the parents or the legal guardians of the underage person. Such written permission must be on file at the local government entity in charge of enforcing the rules and regulations established by the FTC. Anyone violating these terms is admitting by default that they hold harmless the owners and operators of this channel. Any and all questions should be addressed to your local branch of the FTC.